Hawaii is a tropical paradise, a land blessed with spectacular beauty and the spirit of aloha. Dana Ireland was smart, fit, and full of life. She loved the big island of Hawaii. On Christmas Eve, 1991, Dana's life was stolen. She was deliberately run over while riding her bicycle, sexually assaulted, dumped into the bushes, and left to die. A local man confessed to the murder and said 2 brothers helped him. The man recanted his confession, but no one believed him.
It's like the story of the boy who cried wolf. Once you start to tell the truth, nobody gonna listen.
Crime scene DNA did not match any of the 3 men, but all 3 were convicted anyway. It raises questions. Are the 3 convicted men innocent scapegoats? Why aren't the police pursuing the man who left his male DNA on Dana Ireland? Why was exonerating new DNA evidence locked up by court order and not given to the convicted men? In episode 13, we will show the wrongful conviction climate on the Big Island. We'll show how the power tools of inflammatory media, dubious witnesses, ignoring forensic science, and official misconduct were used to convict the 3 defendants. Question: how do you get 3 convictions in a murder and sexual assault case where none of the defendants match the male DNA from the crime? Answer: you use the power tools of noble cause corruption. One power tool of noble cause corruption is to ignore or manipulate forensic evidence. In June 1994, Pauline voluntarily confessed to being involved in the murder of Dana Ireland. Detective Guillermo knew he could corroborate the Frank Pauline confessions if the forensic evidence aligned. 7 years after the murder of Dana Ireland, in January 1999, there was little, if any, corroboration of the only evidence against the 3 defendants, that being Frank Pauline's confessions. The forensics did not add up. There was no tire track match, no bite mark match, and importantly, in January 1999, the semen DNA found on Dana Ireland did not match the suspects. 7 years after the murder of Dana Ireland, law enforcement had little or no corroboration of the Frank Pauline confessions. Eventually, however, there were a number of witnesses who came forward to help corroborate the confessions. Many of them had incentives to testify. These are some of the witnesses who helped the state corroborate the confessions of Frank Pauline. In Frank Pauline's 1999 trial, convicted sex offender Shane Kobayashi testified for the prosecution. Here is news coverage from KHON-TV, Hawaii News Now, about Shane Kobayashi's testimony in the Frank Pauline trial.
Kobayashi had his own trouble with the law. He was convicted of sex assault in 1995. He served just 3 years of a 10-year sentence in exchange for his testimony.
Sir, you have a deal, an agreement with the government in this case. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
Eventually, 5 convicted felons would testify for the prosecution. Besides Kobayashi, Michael Ortiz, Demetrio Gonzalez, Jeffrey Alfonso, and convicted double murderer Shannon Rodriguez also testified for the state of Hawaii. The jurors may have looked skeptically at witnesses like Shane Kobayashi and Michael Ortiz. They were convicted felons who received time off their prison sentences after they agreed to testify. They had clear incentives, but other witnesses came forward to testify who didn't have criminal records. After the Frank Pauline confessions, the Ireland family put up reward posters around the Big Island. The posters offered $25,000 in reward money for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Dana Ireland's killers. The police knew they could solve the crime if they could find the owner of the blue, bloody Jimmy Z t-shirt left at the crime. So they informed the public. 3 witnesses came forward and said the bloody blue Jimmy Z brand t-shirt found at crime scene 2 belonged to Frank Pauline. This was the decisive evidence in both trials. DNA experts said the blood was Dana Ireland's. Surely the killer of Dana Ireland wore that t-shirt. If that t-shirt belongs to Frank Pauline, then his confessions were true. He killed Dana Ireland. If his confessions were true, then the Schweitzer brothers were guilty. In both trials, Stephen Deering testified the bloody blue t-shirt found next to Dana Ireland's dying body belonged to Frank Pauline. Witness Lynn Matthews testified in both trials about the blue t-shirt found at crime scene 2. Matthews testified the bloody blue Jimmy Z t-shirt was the same one he and Frank Pauline had bartered over. A powerful witness for the prosecution was Charla Figueroa. In 1991, she was Frank Pauline's live-in girlfriend. Charla testified that she was in shock when she saw the bloody t-shirt on television. For the first time, she realized that Frank Pauline was a suspect for the case.
I was in shock.
And why were you in shock?
Because that's the first time I found out that he was a suspect for this case.
In a 2017 court declaration, Dr. David Hamer confirmed that the male DNA on the Jimmy Z t-shirt excludes Frank Pauline. It also excludes the Schweitzer brothers. Steve Deering, Lynn Matthews, and Charla Figueroa were incorrect. Judges for Justice is informed that 6 witnesses divided the reward money, but we do not know for sure. The Ireland family did not make public what individuals received the reward money or the dollar amounts. One of the power tools of noble cause corruption is inflammatory media. The Big Island of Hawaii is one of the most isolated counties in the country. The crime and the defendants were often front-page news in the local newspapers. Rick Casberg was a political science professor at the University of Hawaii at Hilo from 1974 through 2009. In this 2011 interview, he describes the notoriety of the crime.
Anybody who was here at the time remembers this case. It's something that just was in the news constantly.
From Christmas Day 1991 and for the next 9 years, the crime was big news on the Big Island of Hawaii.
Christmas Day 1991. 23-year-old Dana Ireland lies dead in a hospital morgue after being raped and beaten. On Hawaii's Big Island, the brutal slaying makes big news.
9 months before Frank Pauline's trial would start, vigilante-type posters appeared saying, "Wanted dead, Ian and Sean Schweitzer." In this newspaper article, Frank Pauline is called the walking crime wave. Also shown is a photo of Frank Pauline giving a one-finger salute. On Friday afternoon, August 27, 1999, the 3 Honolulu TV stations interrupted their regular programming to carry the verdict of Frank Pauline live from the Hilo courthouse.
We, the jury in this case, find the defendant guilty of the offense of murder in the second degree.
Against the backdrop of the Frank Pauline media circus, the Schweitzer brothers would stand trial for their lives. It could be argued that if anyone ever deserved to not have a fair trial, it was Frank Pauline. But not so with the Schweitzer brothers. Everyone said they were good kids from a good family. Literally, Sean had been a choir boy. Ian, as a teenager, rode his bicycle delivering the local newspaper to his neighborhood. The number one issue in the Schweitzer and Pauline appeals to the Hawaii Supreme Court was whether or not the Big Island negative pretrial publicity severely prejudiced the juries. Cliff Hunt was Frank Pauline's attorney for his trial and his appeal. In November 2000, Hunt argued to the Hawaii Supreme Court that if ever there was a case that a judge should have moved to another island, this was the case. Take a look at a 1966 holding of the United States Supreme Court. The court noted the pervasiveness of modern communications and the difficulty of eradicating prejudicial publicity from the minds of jurors. Therefore, the U.S. Supreme Court held that the trial courts must take strong measures to ensure a fair trial. The trial judge should transfer the trial to another county where the jury pool has not so been permeated with publicity. The key words in the ruling state that the judge must take strong measures. The words leave no wiggle room for the trial judge. In a 1974 case, the Hawaii Supreme Court also established that a jury must be impartial, substantially free from the biasing effects of pretrial inflammatory publicity. In a small county like the Big Island, the problem of pretrial inflammatory media is exacerbated. The authors of the book Murder in Paradise, both Big Island residents who covered the trials, state that it is impossible to find jurors who have not heard details of the case or know the participants in the case. Co-author of Murder in Paradise, Rick Casberg, discusses the jury pool on the Big Island.
A lot of people had friends or relatives or acquaintances who were somehow involved in this, whether police or fire or friends of the Irelands or friends of suspects. A lot of people had some sort of personal involvement with this.
Let's look at a summary of the inflammatory pretrial publicity that may have impacted the Pauline and Schweitzer juries. This chart's left-hand column lists the prejudicial publicity that may have biased the jury pool on the Big Island. They include the 8 years of local newspaper coverage, bumper stickers demanding the defendants be indicted, Citizens for Justice activities, Wanted Dead, Ian and Sean Schweitzer posters. These influences would not have been present on other islands. The Big Island, Hawaii County, is the Third Circuit Court. At the time of the trials, it had a population of about 150,000. The First Circuit Court is Honolulu County, the island of Oahu. It had a population of about 875,000. The Fifth Circuit Court is Kauai Island and County with a population of 60,000. The First Circuit Court, Honolulu County, and the Fifth Circuit Court, Kauai County, received no exposure to the prejudicial publicity listed in the left-hand column of this chart. Remember, the trial court must take strong measures and transfer to another county because it is difficult to erase the prejudicial publicity from the minds of jurors. We can see from this chart that Big Island pretrial inflammatory publicity was wide and deep. However, in comparison, the First Circuit Court, with a population of about 875,000, would have been best suited to find jurors with little or no exposure to pretrial prejudicial publicity. One of the power tools is official misconduct. Judges for Justice believes there are many examples of official misconduct in the convictions of the three Big Island men. I explained one of them in a 2019 presentation in Seattle. After the plea deal was struck, the prosecutor announced in a press release that Sean Schweitzer had taken a polygraph examination in support of his confession, and he passed. Here is page 3 of the April 2000 press release. The prosecution announced that Sean Schweitzer had passed a lie detector test in support of his confession.
The police took a taped confession from him with a polygraph, which indicated that he was telling the truth.
Polygraph examiners report one of three conclusions. The subject was truthful, inconclusive, or deceptive. In a June 26, 2016 letter from Albert Ian Schweitzer's post-conviction attorneys, Hawaii Innocence Project, to the Hawaii County Police Chief, toward the bottom of the letter, it is noted that the polygraph examiner of Sean Schweitzer told the Hawaii Innocence Project that the result was deception indicated. In April 2015, I met with Sean Schweitzer's attorney, Keith Shigatomi. He was present in 2000 when Sean took a polygraph exam. The polygraph examiner worked for the Hawaii Attorney General. Mr. Shigatomi reported to me that Sean failed the polygraph not once, but twice. Both times, the polygraph examiner told Keith Shigatomi that Sean was deceptive. Judges for Justice believes that Sean Schweitzer did not pass a polygraph as the prosecutor alleged. On May 9, 2000, Sean Schweitzer was out of custody and sentenced to 5 years of probation. Afterwards, Lincoln Ishida spoke to the press. Reporters asked him about the problem that there was no DNA match to any of the three defendants. Ishida said that he thought the sperm DNA was from Frank Pauline, but because the sample was small and degraded, it gave a false reading. He vowed his office would check with the lab for an explanation. Lincoln Ishida told the press that he thought it was Frank Pauline's sperm, even though DNA scientists had eliminated Frank Pauline as the source. Ishida told the press that he thought the DNA test gave a false reading, even though the DNA lab reported a full profile with no indication that the sample was degraded or too small. Lisa Calandro was the court-appointed DNA expert witness. She worked for the court, the prosecution, and the defense. She conducted the DNA testing in her lab. In an August 24, 2019 email, she states she has no recollection of speaking with Lincoln Ishida after the Pauline and Schweitzer trials were over. Lincoln Ishida was neither qualified to give an opinion that the DNA test gave a false reading, nor qualified to give an opinion that the sperm belonged to Frank Pauline. Ishida was untrustworthy when he failed to check with the lab after making a promise to do so. Deputy Prosecutor Lincoln Ishida's false claim that Sean passed a polygraph, his incorrect and unqualified opinions on the DNA, and his failure to check with the lab were clear instances of noble cause corruption by using the power tool of official misconduct. The star witness against Albert Ian Schweitzer was Michael Ortiz. Ortiz claimed that Schweitzer confessed to being involved in the murder of Dana Ireland. Michael Ortiz testified that Ian Schweitzer said he had accidentally hit Dana Ireland with his car. Ortiz further testified that Schweitzer told him Frank Pauline had yanked out a clump of Ireland's hair and bit her on the breast. The clump of hair on the road and the bite mark had never been made public. If Albert Ian Schweitzer knew about the bite mark and the clump of hair, he must have been there. This is powerful evidence that validated the testimony of Michael Ortiz. But let's ask ourselves, what if Ortiz was lying? What if Michael Ortiz had been informed of the clump of hair and bite mark through other sources? The person who saved the day for the prosecution's case against Albert Ian Schweitzer was Billy Pereira, the lead investigator for the Big Island Prosecutor's Office. It was through Pereira's efforts that the prosecutor's star witness was secured. On May 5, 1999, Billy Pereira talked by video conference with Ortiz, who had been transferred to a Minnesota prison. Pereira audiotaped the interview. After audiotaping Ortiz's statement, it occurred to Pereira it was critical to get a videotape of Ortiz. On May 13, 1999, Pereira made the long trip to Minnesota to get Michael Ortiz on videotape. He took a red-eye flight and arrived in South Dakota the following afternoon. He rented a car and drove 3 hours through backwoods country that conjured up images for him of the movie Deliverance. Pereira recounts how he saw Michael Ortiz in the Minnesota prison's medical unit for 6 hours. It occurred to him that Ortiz could change some or all of his testimony, and that would give the defense something to pick apart at trial. So he took only a brief statement from Ortiz on videotape. Pereira's logic doesn't make sense. He originally stated the purpose of the Minnesota trip was to get Ortiz on videotape. Then he says he decided against videotaping because Ortiz might change some or all of his statement. Question: did Billy Pereira spend 6 hours in the Minnesota prison educating Michael Ortiz about the crime, including a clump of Dana's hair on the road and a bite mark on her left breast? If so, that would be rigging the system, official misconduct, and classic noble cause corruption. Billy Pereira has cheated and rigged the system before. According to an article in the October 6, 1995 Hawaii Tribune Herald, Pereira gave a sworn statement where he admitted that as a police officer he had cheated on his oral exams for lieutenant and captain. He also admitted being a member of a police promotion board that rigged scores to promote Ken Matheson to the rank of sergeant. This is the front page of the Hawaii Tribune Herald newspaper on August 24, 1999. Among other things, it shows a photo of the Schweitzer Volkswagen in the basement of the Hilo courthouse. The article notes that the jury and judge had viewed the Volkswagen the afternoon before on August 23rd. In Frank Pauline's confessions, he had claimed that after Ian Schweitzer had run Dana Ireland over, she was picked up and put into the trunk of the VW. After the testimony in the Frank Pauline trial, the jury was taken down to the basement of the courthouse to view the car. This is a photo of the Schweitzer VW that the judge and jury saw. There was a problem. The gas tank had been removed from the trunk. This is a photo of the Schweitzer VW with the gas tank installed properly in the trunk. The photo on the right is the Schweitzer Volkswagen with the gas tank installed in its proper place in the trunk. The photo on the left is the VW as the jury saw it on Monday afternoon, August 23rd. Billy Pereira had removed the gas tank just prior to being viewed by the judge and jury. On Tuesday morning, August 24, 1999, Frank Pauline's attorney accused the prosecution of intentionally misrepresenting or tampering with the evidence. Hunt was angry because the prosecution had removed the gas tank, giving the jury the impression the trunk compartment was larger than it actually was, thereby making Pauline's confession statement that Dana Ireland had been put in the VW trunk seem more plausible. Under questioning from the judge, it came out that Billy Pereira, the prosecutor's investigator, made the decision to remove the gas tank just before the jury saw it. Hawaii law states that a person commits the misdemeanor crime of tampering with physical evidence if they remove or alter physical evidence with the intent to impair its verity in the impending proceeding. It is our opinion that by removing the gas tank just before the jury saw the evidence, Charlene Eboshi and Billy Pereira altered the physical evidence with the intent to impair its verity. After hearing about the misconduct of the prosecution, Judge Amano ordered that the jury would view the Schweitzer VW a second time. This time, the gas tank was where it belonged, in the trunk. The removal of the gas tank from the VW was probably a crime, tampering with physical evidence. But in addition, it is proof that the prosecution engaged in noble cause corruption, an attitude of, we know he's guilty, we're going to do what we have to do, even commit a crime, to keep him locked up. The viewer may want to stop the video and read this list in detail. These are some of the prosecution's actions Judges for Justice believes are official misconduct. In summary, we believe this progression resulted in the wrongful conviction of the three defendants. The murder and sexual assault of Dana Ireland was a shocking crime. It led to a community in fear. Citizens marching in the streets, the victim's father, and politicians put pressure on law enforcement for results. Frank Pauline confessed, and tunnel vision, the absolute certainty that he was guilty, set in. This tunnel vision led to its perverse byproduct of noble cause corruption. The power tools of noble cause corruption were used to get three convictions with very little, if any, credible evidence. The inflammatory pretrial publicity was severe. The defendants were convicted long before they went to trial. Incentivized witnesses testified. Some received time off their prison sentences. Some received reward money. Forensic evidence was ignored, and the prosecutor opined the lab gave a false reading. The prosecution's removal of the gas tank from the VW was tampering with the evidence, one of the many acts of official misconduct that evidence noble cause corruption. This ends episode 13. In episode 14, we will show you how to evaluate any alleged wrongful conviction, maybe one in your own community. We will also show you how Judges for Justice goes about helping the innocent obtain their release from prison.